Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Ned Bellavance, Ned1313 on Twitter, and welcome to an episode of Tech Analysis. Today, I'm going to be talking about StorageOS and their presentation at Cloud Field Day 10. Now, before I get into that, you might be wondering, what is Cloud Field Day 10 and why do I care? Well, Cloud Field Day 10, or Cloud Field Day in general, is part of the larger Tech Field Day series of events that's put on by Gestalt IT. In each event, we have a number of different presenters that give a presentation, if you will. It could be 2 hours or a 1 hour slot, and the presentation is to a set of delegates. And I was one of those delegates. There's usually 12 of us. And during the presentation, we are free to interrupt, ask questions, and we're also monitoring Twitter to see if the live audience who can watch it on stream has any questions that they want us to ask the presenters as well. We are the voice of those who are watching and trying to dig into and make each presentation as interesting as possible. I'll talk a little more about Tech Field Day and Cloud Field Day in general if you're interested at the end of the video. But for now, let's focus on StorageOS. Now, I was not familiar with StorageOS prior to this presentation. They're a new company to me. The closest analogy, and I'm not sure who coined this, but the closest analogy that I can make to what StorageOS does is their vSAN for Kubernetes. Now, if you're not familiar with vSAN, well, I guess that analogy is not going to make a whole lot of sense to you. But if you're in the world of VMware and you're familiar with the concept of vSAN, then I got to say that StorageOS is going to make a lot of sense to you. It's just the same kind of idea, but in the sphere of Kubernetes instead. Now, if you think about what vSAN is, you're basically taking a number of compute nodes, in this case, ESXi hosts, each with some amount of onboard storage, which has to be the same, consistent across all nodes. That's just a requirement of the solution. So you have these ESXi servers with onboard storage. And what vSAN does is take all of that distributed storage and turn it into a single storage pool, or I guess you can create multiple storage pools, but basically a virtual storage pool or a virtual storage array. They call it vSAN, and SAN actually stands for Storage Area Network, but I don't want to nitpick too much. It's basically a distributed storage array. So that's the idea behind vSAN. What does StorageOS do? Okay, very similar concept. You in Kubernetes have a bunch of nodes, and all of those nodes are running some flavor of Linux, and they're running the kubelet, which makes them part of this Kubernetes cluster. Now, each of those nodes could have some amount of physical storage attached to that node. What if you could take all of those physical storage resources and put them together to create a virtual storage array? That's basically what StorageOS is doing. But rather than running as a component of the hypervisor with a virtual appliance, now they're running their control plane and their data plane as containers inside pods in Kubernetes. So when you want to use StorageOS, you would deploy it using an operator, and then you would have pods running on each of your nodes that wants to consume this storage. And those pods are basically the equivalent of your virtual appliance in the world of vSAN. Now, that's the very basic foundational idea. Why would you even want to take advantage of something like this in the world of Kubernetes? Well, there are many features that typical storage is lacking when it comes to Kubernetes. And one would be replication. Another one would be persistence. Imagine that you have a pod that's running a database, and that pod, for whatever reason, needs to be shut down and started up on a different node. Maybe you're draining a node for maintenance, or maybe you're upgrading the image that pod is using. If it pops up on another node, and it was using local storage, well, now the local storage it was using for its persistent volume is not on that other node. You've got a problem. That's where a distributed storage array helps out. StorageOS has that same storage replicated across multiple nodes, and it can actually connect the storage on one node to a pod running on a totally separate node. So you don't even need to fire up the pod exactly where the storage is that has the persistent volume, because StorageOS is taking care of that plumbing for you. That seems pretty useful, especially for on-premises. Now, in terms of their solution, you might be wondering about cost. Now, unfortunately, their solution seems to be fairly expensive. They quoted it that it's around $1,000 a node, and as far as I can tell, it doesn't differentiate between nodes that are running and providing storage and other nodes that may only be consuming that storage. If you have their pods running on a node, then that node has to be licensed in some way. So that's fundamentally where the money's going to come from. And when they say $1,000 a node, that would be an annual cost. So it's not like a monthly thing. But still, that is a steep price to pay. So you got to make sure that the features that it's offering actually benefit you. Now, if you are running in a cloud type scenario, say you're running AKS on Microsoft Azure, well, in that case, I don't know that StorageOS makes a ton of sense unless there's a killer feature inside it that doesn't exist in the native offering from Microsoft. If I was running in AKS and I wanted shared storage across my nodes, I could simply use Azure Files and use that as a mount point. And if I provision persistent volumes using Azure Files, it will be available on any of the nodes that that pod happens to fire up on. Okay. Alternatively, if I tried to use something like StorageOS, I would have to pay for the onboard storage for each of those nodes, because I'm going to be adding Azure virtual disks to each of those nodes to provide capacity. So I'm paying for the storage for that, and then I'm paying for the licensing on top of that storage. Whereas if I'm just going to use Azure Files, I'm paying just for the storage because the licensing, as it were, is already bundled into the cost. And you can kind of draw the same parallel to any of the other cloud-hosted Kubernetes platforms out there. There may be some killer features that you like in StorageOS, but I gotta say, for a cloud deployment, I'm not certain. Now, on premises, it actually makes a ton of sense. There's a good chance you already have some servers with a bunch of physical storage on them, and being able to provide a virtual storage array to your Kubernetes deployments, well, that's kind of nice. That's an obvious win there. Another reason to use this product outside of the convenience of having a virtual storage array is if you want consistency in deployment across multiple Kubernetes clusters. So if you're in a bigger environment where you happen to be running both on premises and in the cloud, and you want to have a consistent storage experience for all of your different Kubernetes clusters, StorageOS could make a lot of sense for that as well. You'd have the same storage classes for every single one. So an application that you have a Helm chart for or a manifest for, you can reference the same storage class regardless of where you're deploying it, because it's going to be the same storage class because StorageOS is managing that. And you're going to be using the same CSI in all of these different locations because it's the StorageOS CSI. So if that is of interest to you, I will put a link down in the show notes that gives a link to not only their presentation from Cloud Field Day, but also their website, so you can check out more for yourself. They do have a free trial available, so if you just want to take this thing for a test drive, you can absolutely do that as well. That does it for the StorageOS portion of this video, but I did want to get back to the Cloud Field Day and the larger Tech Field Day family. Now, you might be wondering, man, this sounds like a lot of work. What do you really get out of this? And the answer is you get an insider view in all of these new technologies, and you also get to meet a bunch of amazing people who are part of the Tech Field Day family, including those who work for Tech Field Day and the delegates. It's a great community, and just getting integrated with those people will open up all kinds of opportunity for you. So if that sounds like something that you might be interested in, check down in the show notes. You will see a link to Tech Field Day where you can nominate yourself as a delegate. So hopefully that sounds interesting to you. Maybe I'll see you on the next Tech Field Day event. You know, if you've been enjoying what I've been doing with this channel, you could all support me. I do have a Patreon. You can find it on Patreon by just searching Ned in the Cloud, or look down in the description. There is a link there as well. If that's not your thing, I totally get it. If you don't mind subscribing, I really appreciate that. You know, that helps. If you want to just like the video, apparently that helps with discoverability. I don't something like that. You don't have to hit the bell, though. Skip the bell. I don't like getting notified constantly on my phone when new videos come out, and I assume that you don't as well, so you can skip that. And if none of that's your thing, hey, just check me out on Twitter. Say hi. It's Ned1313. Regardless, that'll do it for me for today. Until next time, stay healthy, stay safe out there, and bye for now.